right, on to episode 18, the Alpine Goat. Not to be confused with the Alpine Ibex that we have done previously, but it is somewhat similar. Mere fact of it being from a very similar area, that being the French Alps. And what we are going to do today is going to be a little bit different. First and foremost, since I've jumped straight into getting things set up, we are going to be using the prefab barn that comes with the game. And this way we can really shorten the amount of time it takes to make our new attraction more interesting. Now, before we get too far into it, I do want to make this note right here with creating environments. If you ever need to do this, change a certain area for another. As you saw there, you can actually copy and paste different colors. So, for instance, the color of the barn is not one of the standard issued colors, so you can tap one of the items that has the color you want, copy and paste the code that comes in, the color code, and then you can paste it right into the other item that you want. Now, because we jumped a little bit too quickly into this, I did not have the time to introduce someone who I'm not sure if is going to be a continuing part of this journey, but I drew up a little friend that might give us some help anytime I have information wrong. Say hello to Prim. She is going to be helping me. Like I said, if there's any information I find out later and need to add in post, she will be popping up with a little information bubble. And hopefully you guys enjoy her. Now, let's get into it, shall we? So first and foremost, I decided to open that door up a little bit more so it's more accessible to the animals. And we are also going to add an open door here because I feel like it is more aesthetically appealing to have an open door where either keepers or the animal can walk out of, rather than having the closed door like it gives for the addition. Now, there is one little detail though. I did plan to have the walkthrough area actually go through those doors, but I eventually decided against it just because the actual guest entrance area doesn't fit through the doorway because it's all pretty much double doors. So I kind of did this for naught, but it doesn't matter. It still looks a little better in my opinion. Now, the reason I've been talking so much about the exhibit already is because there isn't too much to say about the Alpine Goat. As a matter of fact, it is so entrenched in our culture, there's not a lot of information. Essentially, it's pretty much always been a part of our society. The first goat was actually tamed in an area known as the Fertile Crescent, which is modern-day Iraq, Iran, Syria, and parts of eastern Turkey about 10,000 years ago. So once we pretty much came across the Alpine Goat in France, we just immediately domesticated it. As a matter of fact, the entirety of the history section on Wikipedia for the Alpine Goat is, and I quote, "Alpine goats originated in the French Alps." That's it. That's the entire history section on Wikipedia. So let's just say finding information was a little bit difficult and I had to get a little bit creative. So, as per usual, even after adding the prefab, we are going to make our little border here to give an idea of the shape we want the exhibit to run. And we're actually going to be making a fence from scratch to give it that sort of barnyard appearance that I feel really fits. Speaking of fit, I was very surprised on how well the enclosure doors actually fit for the zookeepers. And so I stuck it right there, and with just a little bit of editing, I was able to sort of get rid of that extra space, and it fits like a glove, and I'm so proud of that. And to cut back on time and to pretty much speed up this video so it's not literally half an hour long, Here is what I made. It's not perfect, but I think it fits really well. It really matches the entrance gate. There's a little bit of differences, but for the most part, I think it works really well. And if you guys want, I am going to post this prefab in the workshop if you feel like it really looks good to you. And we are gonna have to do a little bit of editing here and there so that, you know, when it connects to the barn, it doesn't look ridiculous. But until then, we are pretty much just going to continue like such. Now, let's get into as much of the information as I have about our goat. Now, let's discuss the biggest, most important thing about this animal. Why is it in the farmyard pack? Well, quite simply, it is one of, if not the best dairy goat. While some goats are domesticated for meat, it's specifically raised and bred for its milk production. And for those of you who don't know, goat milk is actually slightly better for you than cow's milk. Generally speaking, they will have a lower fat content and even a lower protein content, sometimes larger depending on the animal. But the Alpine Goat in particular has a fat percentage of 3.4% compared to the cow's 3.6%. And for protein, it is at 2.9 compared to the cow's 3.1. And not only is the milk healthier for you, they can actually produce 2 gallons a day. And during their milking season, can last 284 days. So a very large amount of milk. And you know what? Since she's here, Prim, throw up those numbers. Thank you. And for the most part, that is the main reason that they are bred. And the important note is that even though the Alpine Goat is technically only one species, there is a distinct subspecies. Now, the original obviously comes straight from France, in the Alps, obviously, but there is a secondary branch that is in the United States. They were brought to the U.S. in 1904 to pretty much show off at one of the many county fairs, and it has pretty much become a go-to for milk production ever since. Now, the reason it's considered a subspecies is because a lot of times they are interbred with other species of goat, depending on, where they live, purpose for the goat. Some down in the south and in the southwest were bred with goat species that are good in the heat, because while the Alpine goat is very adaptable, they do tend to struggle in extreme heat. They do pretty well in the cold and even in the slight heat, but once you get down closer to the desert or along the Gulf of Mexico, it's a little too hot for them most of the time. Now, as for the size of the goat, they're actually a medium to large breed. Males get to about 170 pounds, and the females about 135. And this sort of aids in why they're able to make so much milk compared to other milk-bearing species. For instance, a few pygmy species actually do produce milk. That's more of a local, though, sort of just for your personal needs, not too much, if you were to try to get into any sort of market. Now, the milk itself has a Swiss-like flavor, which I guess makes sense, seeing how Swiss cheese is most likely made either from these goats or a similar species. Now, let's say you are looking into getting a nice little dairy goat yourself. Well, obviously, when it comes to producing milk, the animal in question is going to have to become pregnant and have a kid, and it's known as a kid for goats. But what would that entail? How many? What can you expect when your goat is expecting? Well, usually the Alpine goat will have twins, so two little kids. However, it is known to occasionally have one or three, and in very rare occasions, even quadruplets. So do keep that in mind if you ever decide to have a nice Alpine goat for your dairy needs. Now, back to the exhibit, we are going to add a few rocks to give it some more life, because in all honesty, that's a pretty common thing to see, not just, in the French countryside, but here in America and other parts of the world. There's no such thing as a perfectly flat area like you would get in game. So we're going to add a few rocks, and it's also useful because, obviously, being a mountain grade goat, it's going to want to climb on things. So giving it a little something to play with is always a good call. Now, for the last bit of information I have, I know you're looking at the time and you're like, he's at the end? Yes, yeah. Like I said, there was not a lot to go on. But we are going to discuss taming. So, obviously, all goats are domesticated. There's no question there. However, you still need to train the goats. And from what I can tell, they're actually very easy to train. They are very smart. They are very affectionate. So it's very easy for you, if you decide to go through with getting a goat, that you are absolutely able to tame it. Best done at a young age. They're easier to imprint. So they're very friendly, but they are very stubborn. So getting them as kids and raising them and teaching them, how they're, what's good, what's right, what's wrong, just like a real kid. Except it's probably cheaper and won't disappoint you in the future. Oh, well, I say that. You could have accidentally gotten a male instead of a female, and then you're not getting dairy. But that's an issue you'll have to cross if you ever decide to do it. Now we are finishing up here when it comes to the actual guest part of the exhibit. We're just going to be we're going to be modifying this fence so it fits a little better. Since we still have a decent amount of time, I actually did a little bit of research and wanted to maybe even give you some help if you decide to go down the path of owning your own goat. At least where I live, it's not relatively uncommon for people to try to raise a goat, whether it be for meat or milk, in an attempt to save some money. And I figure since I'm working on the last of this, I'm going to do what I can to help you out if you also have this idea. Now, this isn't specifically for Alpine goats. This is actually for just general information, and, depending on the breed, requirements may vary, but for the most part, this is the information I could find that goes well with dairy goats. So, first and foremost, if you would like to own a dairy goat, you are going to have to make sure that you have plenty of space for it. Now, you may look at the in-game amount of being 4,197 square feet as being a proper size, but I don't know where in the world Planet Zoo actually got this information from, because it isn't accurate for anything, to be completely honest. It's too small for a proper grazing area. That would have been 13,068 square feet, but again, that's for grazing if you don't plan on feeding them at all, like by yourself. And just general housing and play distance, it's less than 100 square feet, so I don't know where they came out with this number. But yeah, if you do plan on taking full care of the animal, feeding it every day yourself, you're pretty much only going to need, let's say, 150 square feet of area, so that's actually pretty doable for most people. If you plan on just letting it graze and not really worrying about feeding it, you're going to need about a third of an acre to make sure it properly gets the food it needs. Speaking of food, it's important to note that goats eat roughly 3 to 4% of their body weight every day. For example, the Alpine goat, that would be it would be roughly 4.7 pounds of food a day. Luckily, it's pretty easy. Goats have a wide appetite. Obviously, they're completely herbivorous, so no meats or anything. However, here's a short list of some of the foods that you can give them, and this is not a comprehensive list. There are plenty of other foods you can, but very common ones are corn, oats, hay, grasses, and beetroot. Like I said, there's a lot of other ones, including soy and a few others, if you would rather go that route. And depending on what the animal eats will dictate how their milk will taste. Not only their milk, though, if you do decide to get a goat for meat purposes, it will also taste different based on the diet. That's actually kind of a standard situation when it comes to animals. You know, what they eat dictates how they taste. Now, it is also important to note that they do need more than just foliage for their dietary needs. They're going to need a few other elements, such as magnesium oxide, mineral salt, and dicalcium phosphate. Those are actually very common to come by. So even though they're big words that you probably aren't used to hearing, it's very easy to find. If you do plan on getting goats, you can find a whole bunch of different options out there, and you know, it's certainly something to look up. Obviously, you are going to have different reasons and results for any specific species, and of course, wherever you're living, state, country, just make sure that you follow all the laws into adopting a food-based animal. So not just goats. Like if you decide to buy chickens or whatever, make sure you're following the laws and make sure if there's any regulations to keep track of that. So now that I have officially run out of talking points, let's take a look and see how our goats enjoy their environment. And yet, looks like there is a bit of a terrain issue that I have to deal with, and that is also something important to note, that when making your paths through exhibits, there's going to be that either dirt or sand path, if you decide to do it the way I do, that will influence the exhibit itself. So you may have to either change the consistency of the path. So like I have sand being used here, and they don't like that much sand. So to sort of counteract that, I changed the path from sand, and we're actually going to turn it into dirt. Now, I made the mistake of reading it wrong. I thought I wanted more sand, and, well, I found that out real quick that I'm an idiot, and we fixed that real quick here. But other than me just cleaning up the environment, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything you want to know, feel free to ask. If there's anything you'd like to add, feel free in adding it into the comments, because I'd love to know more. If you have any experience raising goats, you know, whether it be meat or dairy, I'd love to hear it. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I would love to see you next time where we talk about the American Standard Donkey. All right, have a good one. Go outside, enjoy nature, and stay safe. All right, thank you. Goodbye.